Welcome to the Clangers Pod. This is where three old road testers and serial crap car collectors witter on about cars from the late 1990s and early 2000s, the models which are stuck between being classics and bangers. They are the Clangers. I'm Tom Barnard.
I'm Mike Askew.
And I'm Craig Cheetham.
A quick recap in case you haven't listened to any of the first three episodes. We all worked together on Auto Express magazine in the late 90s and early 2000s, which means we drove pretty much every new car that was launched. And thanks to that, we have plenty of stories to tell.
This week we'll be moving on to the A list of clangers because we're talking about the original Mercedes A-Class and the Audi A2. They were cars which were ahead of their time, almost bankrupted the companies, and occasionally fell over.
Or at least wobbled when you put the wipers on.
Indeed. Do we have a business update, Mike?
We do have a business update. I've just been checking the stats. We're doing well. It's 16th Automotive UK podcast, so we've risen up through the ranks there, which is pretty good. New Zealand, thanks to Craig's contacts and mentions last time, we're up to 39th now, most listened to automotive podcast. But under work to do, the United States of America. We're 205th. I mean, it's a big country, probably got a lot of podcasts, but Craig, do you know anyone in the States? Last time you told us that you'd looked after New Zealand as if it was the country itself you'd looked after, but have you looked after the United States as well?
I used to work for an American company. I've got lots of contacts in
count.
PR at General Motors, so
Okay.
I'm sure there's a couple of people I can lean on.
Did they get the A-Class? Did they get the A-Class and A2 in America? I'm not sure they did they?
No, this probably isn't the episode to start our American assault with, to be fair. I think perhaps we save it for next time and then choose some cars that they had and were quite popular over there.
Okay. Well, we'll work on that, Craig. But first, we have to find out, as usual, what Craig has bought or sold this week.
What's Craig bought this week so far?
I've bought a Peugeot 309 this week. I thought I'd take it a bit retro.
Nice.
Didn't intend to buy a car. I never do, but I always like it when a car has a story. They talk to me that way. And I got in touch with the vendor who was on Facebook Marketplace, and he was quite surprised to receive a message from somebody who was more than semi-literate, and he sort of seemed very keen to sell it to me. And we had a little bit of a chat about it. The story is this: I work in a garage, and a while back we had a call from a company that was selling a house. It was due to complete, and there was a car in the garage. Obviously, it was a deceased estate that the house had come from, and they needed the car removing. So they said to the garage, "Can you just come and get it and take it away?" Which is what he did. And he sort of had a look at it, and he thought, "Hang on a minute, this is a bit too good to throw away." So he changed the cam belt, stuck some new tyres on it, got it through an MOT. It's had a complete brake and suspension overhaul as well. And it's great. It's a 1.9 GLD.
So is that normally aspirated?
That's normally aspirated. It's one up from the totally miserable specification. So if you wanted to be really, really miserable, you could have an XLD. I think it was XLD it was. And if you wanted to be, a bit more luxurious, you've got the GLD, which didn't really have much more. It has no power steering or anything like that. It's got head restraints and a rear wiper, and a radio cassette player. So yeah, it has a few bits on it, but it's a real nice back to basics car, and it reminds you actually how good that XUD engine must have been back in the 1980s, because it's actually reasonably quick. It doesn't feel out of its depth in modern traffic or anything like that, and the 309 always handled really well. So and of course it's got the same doors as a 205, which is.
And what was it? What was it going to be, Craig? The Peugeot 309? Because it wasn't meant to be in the Peugeot range at all, was it?
It wasn't. And one of the reasons it uses quite a lot of the 205 in its construction was to keep costs down, because at the time it was Peugeot Talbot, and they wanted a new Talbot car to replace the Talbot Alpine, which was getting on a bit. I think it was about 10 years old at the time, so they wanted something a bit newer. So they developed this new car, and then there was a bit of a fallout internally, and Talbot disappeared, and they had this car that was ready, more or less fully developed. It was going to be the Talbot Arizona. Wow. And Peugeot just decided to get on with it. It was built in Coventry at the factory in Brighton.
So they deserted the Arizona.
The deserts of the
Amazing.
Arizona, indeed. Yeah.
Am I allowed to ask how much you paid for this gem?
You can. Yeah, I think I paid £800.
Yeah, what's
Yeah.
the plan for it? You going to keep it?
I'm going to keep this one a while because next year I'm doing a charity drive over to the Netherlands to a show called AM Valhalla, which I would recommend to anyone. It's the best car show in the world, especially if you like really, really weird stuff. Um, when I was there this year, there was a guy with a Yugo 45 parked next to a guy with a Maybach 67, and they were sharing barbecue bacon, which is quite sweet. So I'd like to go back and revisit that show, and I think this is the perfect car because I'm going to try and get from my home in Cambridgeshire to the Netherlands and back on one tank of diesel. That's my challenge I'm setting myself.
Now, there's another car which you haven't bought yet this week, and I think we'll save that for the next show.
Hmm.
But all I will say, just to let the listeners know what it's like having conversations with Craig sometimes, is that this car that Craig is shortly going to purchase, I think, is yellow. And
Mhm.
I said to Craig, "Oh, I think you have another yellow car, don't you?" He says, "I currently have two yellow cars." So I named the two yellow cars that I thought Craig had. And he said, "I'd forgotten about those. I've got four yellow cars then."
This is true. The most ironic part of that is that one of the yellow cars I'd forgotten about is currently parked in the railway station car park because I drove it to the railway station a few days ago,
Mm.
left it there, and forgot I had it. Well, I didn't forget I had it; just forgot I had it when I was talking to you.
Since then, Craig,
Hmm.
I've thought of some more. Don't you
Yeah.
have a Seicento Sporting and a Fiat Multipla that are both yellow?
Yes.
So you
Yes.
have at least six yellow
6
cars.
from 2. From thinking you had 2, that's 4 cars unaccounted for when you initially said
Racking my
yes.
brain now to think if I've got any more that I've not disclosed.
So yes, that's what it's like. Craig forgets he has six yellow cars, which is
Is the Rover 75 on there
yeah.
already?
So it's a Rover 75 in primrose yellow,
Yep.
Seicento Multipla, a
Yep.
Rover 45. Is it 45 or a
I've got the
400?
only Rover 45 in trophy yellow, solid yellow Rover 45. It's revolting. I love it.
Um,
Uh,
an MG
ZR,
ZR.
ZR. Yeah.
Is that all of them, or is there another one?
No, that's the one that's at the station,
What?
which is the Renault Megane
Oh
Coupe,
yes.
Phase One. It's a lovely car. That really, really fond of that one. I just forget I own it.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Don't forget when you get back to the station, otherwise you'll rack up huge parking fines. Anyway, this week we'll get on to our cars, shall we? This week we're talking about two small cars from companies which were famous for making big cars. They were both very clever, but they had their wobbles. Now,
Indeed.
unusually, Mike, you've owned them both.
I know this is such a rare occurrence because you two are the serial tap buyers, and I'm just basking in your glory, basically. Generally speaking, but on this occasion, I think this will be the only occasion when we're doing the clangers where I have owned both of them. We are talking about the original Mercedes A-Class and the Audi A2. I had an A190 A190 diesel, long, the long wheelbase one, so it was a kind of sort of facelifted one, which I bought from my dad. Buying cars from parents is never a particularly good idea, and it's the first and last one I've done. But it was great. He ran that as a company car, and I think he was being paid 40 odd p a mile to run it. And it was the cheapest car. I think he easily got 70 miles to gallon out of this thing because it was light. That diesel engine was unstressed. So in the money he made on just driving this car around, he'd agreed to go to all these meetings in various parts of the country because he knew every meeting was profit, basically, because it was so economical. It was a weird thing. It was an automatic, and the gearbox was on its way out. So it was constantly, every time I drove it, it was like, this is the last time it's going to go. But it lasted a long time. I sold it to Don Fraser, the photographer, after I finished with it. He wanted it for something or other, but yeah, it was a good car, that A-Class. I really, really liked it.
Mhm.
Craig, you've had a few, I presume?
I've got one of each. Yeah, I've got a Mercedes A-Class A140,
Right.
an S-Reg 1998, which is one of the very, very first in the UK, in jungle green with a jade green interior. So it's as green as a car gets. It's quite in your face, really. and it's currently off the road because the power steering pumps. It's got an electric power steering pump that's broken, and because of the way it's assembled, which I think we'll come to in a minute, you essentially have to take the whole car apart to get to the power steering pump, and I just can't be bothered. So yeah, that's the A class. I will get around to it. I've said that about everything. The A2, I bought as a little experiment. I wanted to just try one out, and there was a really, really cheap one at the car auctions with 250,000 miles on the clock. And I thought, well, it's a 1.4 TDI, which really, really frugal car. And it was great. The one thing I would say is that the fuel senders aren't that great on them, because it used to say it had half a tank of diesel when it didn't, which led to a failure to proceed once. But apart from that, it was okay. And it's still there. I loaned it to a friend because they were in desperate need of a car for a while. They used it for a bit. The MOT ran out, and I've just not got round to doing anything with it since. But it's not particularly pretty. It's probably more of a parts car, really, than one that's going to soldier on. But it was nice to tick it off the list.
I've never owned either, but if an A class came along which was either green or brown with the right interior, I think I would probably have to buy it, because it's definitely on my list of ones that I will own. But I did go on the international launches of both, and so have the gifts that manufacturers give you. I have them. So, Mike, I think we have a new jingle for our new feature.
It's the blag of the week, yeah, the swag's on the seat, a branded fleece and a bottle of life so sweet. From the Alps to the Med in first class mystique, living the dream on the blag of the week.
So yeah, blags are the gifts that manufacturers give you as a little memento, and in the old days, some of them were quite elaborate, and then more recently, you're lucky if you get a model, which is fine. You don't need them.
We don't need it.
So for the A class, I was on the first launch, which was the one before it fell over. I was given a tape measure, so like something for doing your DIY, which is 3.6 meters long with a picture of the A class on the front, because the A class is 3.6 meters long, which is really short. Yeah, it's really short. So an original Ford Cat is longer than an A class, even though it had loads of legroom because of the clever way it was laid out. And then, of course, it fell over. So they then invited us back to try the revised car, which had ESP, and they'd lowered the suspension a bit. So we got to do elk tests ourselves. And as the gift for that, they gave us a stuffed elk, which you pressed its belly and it snored, and its chest rose up and down. And it was because it's a sleeping elk, because the elk is no longer worried about being hit by an A class, which was a strangely un-Germanic way of saying we've got a sense of humour about this, which I think they had to, because it's such a crisis.
I always love it when the Germans try to have a sense of humour. It's they try a bit too hard, don't they?
Yeah.
I remember when that car came out, when we first got it at Auto Express, it was one of the few cars where almost everybody went downstairs to go and look at it when it was outside, because it was just it was such an unusual car, wasn't it? As you say, it was shorter than a Ford Ka. You couldn't believe that, because you just thought, this looks like a full size, and it was a full size five-seater car, wasn't it? How can it possibly be shorter than a small Ford City car? But it was. It was just a fantastic piece of packaging. And I think the packaging was kind of its downfall, wasn't it? Because it had this sandwich floor. So it had this sort of banana-shaped engine drivetrain combination that kind of sat halfway under the floor, which gave you that space at the front. But it was brilliant. I just thought it was such a clever piece of design, and all that space was in it.
Yeah. Incredible. Do you remember, sort of around that time or before that, Mini did a couple of concept cars that were similarly like clever with their packaging. So they had engines at the rear, and and everyone went, this is what a Mini should be, because the original Mini was such an interesting package. And of course they went, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to just come out with a conventional car that looks a bit like the old one, and it's going to have the engine in the same place. And the packaging on it was, pretty terrible, really. And Mercedes went, no, we're going to go that radical way, and then lost loads of money on it and ended up going back to making the A-Class a pretty conventional car, which is a shame. But not many people wanted a radical Mercedes, did they? And the A2, they gave away a little model, which I've still got. So, well, that big, or a few inches long model, you know, those Audi models, which I've still got somewhere because I thought this is a car I'd quite like to own one day, and it's nice to have a model of a car you own. But what I remember about that car, the packaging wasn't quite as clever as the A-Class, but it was much nicer inside, wasn't it? It had an Audi-esque interior.
Yeah.
But the thing I remember, because we had a long-term one, we had a long-term diesel one, which was ridiculous,
Yeah,
wasn't
I bought it.
Oh, is that the one you bought?
Yeah, I bought that long termer.
I remember the ride not being great on those big wheels, and the smaller ones were much better. But the strange thing was, because it's made of aluminium, and it was very lightweight, which made it more economical and everything else, and means it doesn't rot these days. But it had a huge wiper. It's like the wiper you get on a coach these days, and a marvelous thing with lots of, like, two arms, so it did clever things and went on the windscreen in a certain funny pattern. But it was such an elaborate contraption, this wiper, that if you were sat in traffic in this lightweight car and you put it on the fast wipe because it was quite heavy rain, the car would sway from side to side as you're sitting there, and you got a bit seasick in the heavy rain. But other than that, I think they're great.
It was great, and it was one of those. It was interesting. There's I think Car Magazine about 5 years ago ran a feature about the cars that manufacturers have tanked the most money on. And I've owned 3 of the cars in the top 5, and I suspect you have as well. So A-Class was in there, A2 was in there, Smart, the Aventine, and the Bugatti Veyron. So 2 of those, well, certainly one of those I'll never own.
I've never owned a Bugatti.
Yeah, that's
an Aventine I will own at some point in the not too distant future before they become extinct. I've got to have an Aventine in my life. I think they're wonderful things. The other thing about the A2, well, I know we'll come back to the A-Class in a minute because there's a great story about it, but the A2, if you remember, you couldn't open the bonnet. It wasn't allowed. You had this flap at the front where you could pull out these, again, over-engineered, elaborately designed things that you could top up the oil and the screen wash with, but you couldn't open the bonnet. And lots of car magazines at the time, and I think we did the same, we said, well, this isn't going to be great for buying a second-hand one, this, that, and the other. When I got mine, I realised that you can't open the bonnet, but there's only 4 clips to undo to lift, take the entire thing off. And because it's aluminium, it weighs nothing. So, provided you remember to put it back on again when you finish, you can still get in there and service it. It's not that hard.
On the launch, there was a list of pictures that you had to come back from a car launch with for the magazine art editors to be happy, and one of them was an engine shot, and of course you can't see the engine because it's under a bonnet, so we had to go back and ask one of the Audi technicians if he could possibly come and open the bonnet for us so we could take a picture of the engine, which is something no owner would ever do. The A2 also is one of those cars now where journalists love them. So there are lots of motoring journalists who have either owned an A2 recently or still own one. It's a bit like, do you remember we were talking about the AXGT, and lots of journalists have had those. So again, Steve Fowler, who's one who had an AXGT, he also had an A2 recently, and loads of other people who just seem to love that car because it's one of those things, especially the diesel, where you can just drive it round, cost you buttons to run, and it will never lose money. But the very best ones of those 1.4 TDIs are now £5,000, £6,000, £7,000 because people will pay for the best ones. Whereas the slightly tatty ones are still £500. People will pay for good ones, but the A-Class hasn't quite got there yet. I don't think people are willing to pay $5,000 for a really good A-Class yet.
No, I think they're still very much rooted in banger territory, aren't they? I mean, there's one, there's the Piccadilly Special Edition, which had oxblood red leather inside. It's metallic black with dark red leather. That one's kind of sought after. There was an AMG version as well, wasn't there? But if I remember, it wasn't very good.
Mm-hmm.
Is it the AMG 210 or A210 AMG?
Yeah, that rings a bell.
Mm.
I remember with the A2, because I was talking to an Audi chap after it had finished, and I said, what was one of the problems with A2? And he said perception was one of them, because they did a survey with buyers and that kind of thing. They said they put in a TT and an A2 in front of them, and they said that the majority of the people said that the TT was made of aluminium and the A2 was made of steel, because the A2 looked like it had just been carved out of a billet of aluminium, didn't it? It just had that shape about it. So they were spending all that money on the A2 and getting next to nothing back in terms of sort of public perception of what that car was. But I mean, it's a shame it didn't. But it didn't share any parts with hardly any other Audi cars, did it? So I imagine everything was bespoke for that car. So yeah, such a shame that it didn't make it. But you wonder if that kind of thing gives manufacturers the heebie-jeebies when someone else proposes something that's a bit unusual. I think we have to go through like a 20-year product cycle, don't we, before someone's then brave enough or forgotten that they spanked all that money on something like the A2 to come out with it. But I hope we do see its like again.
Should we go back to the A-Class? Just to sort of recount the story of the Alp test, because it's actually I didn't know this until about 4 or 5 years ago. In fact, no, longer than that. It was 2018. I was doing a feature for a Mercedes-Benz magazine, and I looked into this and spoke to a few people about the A-Class and its shortcomings and the Alp test failure. And I didn't know, but it's actually used as an example for corporate PR students all around the world, as an example of a company taking responsibility for its actions, and a sort of masterclass almost in top PR. So yeah, the story was that when the Alp test happened, and it was a Danish magazine, wasn't it, that had the incident with the car. The whole Mercedes-Benz top brass were in Japan launching the Maybach brand, and the boss of Merck at the time was a guy called Jürgen Huber, and he found out. He got a phone call to say, we've just had this phone call from a Danish journalist. This has happened. It's going to be on the national news. We're in a bit of a pickle here. So the first thing he did was he phoned up head office in Stuttgart and had the production line stopped. He then issued an immediate recall to the 2,500 cars that had already been supplied, and said, give all those customers a brand new car, give them a C-Class so they've got transport. We want those cars back. We're bringing them back in-house. They then flew back to Stuttgart from Japan. I mean, motor industry execs normally sit at the front of the plane, don't they? Go through the curtain and get fed 5 meals on the flight, but they ended up there were only economy seats left, and the Mercedes guys ended up sitting on the floor of the plane discussing their strategy. By the time they got back to Stuttgart, they'd organised a press conference to take place, and that was held within hours of the news breaking about the A-Class falling over on the launch. Which, in terms of owning up to it and fixing it, was pretty responsible from a corporate perspective, and that's why it's used as a teaching aid these days. The answer, I think, in the end was to fit the cars with ESP as standard, and that became law. Certainly in Germany, about 3 years later, every single car on the market had to have it. So the irony being that a car that was once deemed to be potentially one of the most dangerous on the road turned out to be responsible for the launch of a safety system that's probably saved countless lives.
They also, I think, lowered the suspension a bit, which, because they did it in a hurry, it's a bit like if you get in a car that's been tuned and somebody's lowered the springs on it, it ruins the ride, doesn't it? And I do remember driving it and thinking, oh, it's not so good to drive anymore, this car. And it's one of those things of how often would there have been an elk avoidance maneuver that's happened versus people going over potholes, which happens several times a minute in the UK. So you almost want one of those cars you want to modify by putting it back onto higher springs.
And actually, on that note, can I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to ask a question this week because you've done it the last 2 weeks, Tom. When I wrote that feature in 2018, I did some research to see how many 1998 A-Classes were still on the road in Britain. And in 2018, there were 296 of them left. How many do you think there are today, 1998 A-Classes taxed and on the road in the UK?
I'm going to go low because, as you kind of already hinted, fixing things on those cars is a nightmare because the engine and some of the other components, trying to get to them is like, Harrison Ford at the beginning of Raiders of the Lost Ark. You need to do this and change that and it's just not worth it. So
that's why mine's still parked up.
Yeah, I'm going to go 50.
50?
Mm-hmm.
Mike?
38.
38. Well, you're both wrong.
Obviously.
Would you like a clue?
Is it none?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is it?
No. The clue is the clue is there are more than 11.
12.
12. Well done.
There you go. Only 12 left.
12.
And you've got one of them.
Well, mine's not in the stats because mine's not taxing on the road. So hopefully I can get it up to 13.
There was one which I saw at the Festival of the Unexceptional, which I think went from an owner to the Mercedes Heritage Collection to the journalist Andrew Frankel, and then back to their Mercedes collection, and then to somebody else. I think it's done the rounds, but it's a bright red 1.4. It's rather nice.
Yeah.
So that's one of them.
That's a 98, isn't it? That
Yeah.
one.
That was such a strange period for the German car industry, wasn't it? Because you think it all started with Smart toppling over, which is why it ended up with those fat wheel arches and bigger wheels at the back and everything. Then the A-Class did the same. And remember the TT, because it didn't have that spoiler on the back, did it? That started to fly off the road at high speeds and everything. It was almost within a sort of 4 or 5 year, well, probably even less than that. We're going to check the chronology of it. But yeah, it was like a disastrous time, wasn't it, for German brands?
The TT story was a motoring journalist as well. It's driving a press car down the Autobahn, obviously at a ridiculous speed because he was a German motoring journalist. And as he came off at the slip road, obviously he's got a very, very gentle arc on the steering to come off on the slip road. And it was just enough as he was lifting off for the back end to lift off the ground and spin the car around completely. So I think that was another full recall, wasn't it?
It was,
Yeah.
Spoiler and ESP again. So somebody at Bosch must have been rubbing their hands together in glee and thinking about building a new factory when they've got the A-Class and the TT to fit with ESP as standard.
But I remember when we got sent a one with a spoiler. And I remember Dave Johns, who's the editor of Auto Express at the time, saying, take it to an airfield to see if you can crash it, see if it'll do the same thing. And I seem to remember I was like the only one left doing it. I was thinking, well, hang on a minute. Really? Do we really want to find that? So we went to Rendlesham, which was about the few places that was open. So the really spooky blooming airfield in the middle of, was it Suffolk, Norfolk, one of those two places? It was one of those places where the American Air Force had departed very quickly. It was a really eerie place, like all these kind of old World War II, Cold War airfields were. And the runway wasn't particularly well maintained. So we were driving around as fast as we could. And I thought, I don't really, because if you leave the road here, no one's going to find you. I think it was me and the photographer, Nathan. I don't think he could be bothered to kind of go and get help. So, yeah, it was the strangest thing that we were asked to do in those days. Didn't really question it. But, it didn't spin. I doubt we would have even spun the one without the spoiler.
Could have been worse. You've been asked to drive a Volkswagen Polo 5,000 miles across Europe.
You enjoyed that. You're making out you did.
If this is the first time you've listened to the podcast, please go back and listen to episode
3.
Episode 3 for Craig's story of driving across Europe in a Polo. We should probably keep the TT stories for another one because I do have a good TT story about the launch.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. That sounds like a good plan.
Yeah.
Do we want to make a decision now whether we're going to put either of these two into the Clangers Hall of Fame? Should we start with the A-Class? Is that worthy?
I'm going to be controversial and say no, because although it's an interesting car, I don't think it's got staying power.
Okay, I've got A-Class as a no from Tom.
I'm going to say yes, because I think that if you look at the original Alicus Agonis Mini and how it is regarded globally as a masterpiece of packaging, the A-Class was probably the next car to be quite as revolutionary. So I don't think there was another vehicle that was as revolutionary between the two. Therefore, I think that it does have classic potential.
Okay. I'm going to have a casting vote, so I'm going to say yes as well. Sorry, Tom.
It's all right. No problem. Yeah.
I do like it, and I have had one, so I do look at another one thinking, yes, that would be nice. But given Craig's stories about what goes wrong in it, I'm less keen now. A2, is that more clear cut?
Yeah, easily, definitely.
Yep, modern classic.
Which engine would you go for though? Because I know the 1.4 TDI is the one, but you can't go to Heathrow in it without paying the ULEZ charge.
Oh, it's not. Yeah, it's not a ULEZ, is it?
So would you have a 1.4, which is a bit meh, or the 1.6, which breaks down?
I would still have the 1.4 TDI because if you look at the fuel economy of the 1.4 TDI, I suppose it depends, obviously, where you live. If you live in London, this doesn't make sense. But I go to Heathrow maybe 4 or 5 times a year. If I only had one car and it was an Audi A2, I'd save more money by having a 1.4 TDI and paying £12.50 times a year, and enjoy myself a lot more and have a much nicer car. Because that little 3-cylinder TDI engine sounds great, whereas the 1.4 petrol, the same power output, 75 brake horsepower, but it was a really old Volkswagen engine. And VW, they didn't really do any very good petrol engines, I don't think, until much later on. The sort of engines from the 70s and 80s on which this one was based were really quite dull. So I would go for the TDI.
And which wheels would you have? Would you have the nice ones that are bigger and put up with a ride, or would you have the smaller ones because you're now old and you care more
I
about
would
the
actually
ride?
have the. Do you remember those drilled steel wheels with the centre caps that they came on?
No. There
They
was,
were on
No.
the base model one. You had to be an A2S, not an SE. But they had steel wheels and they were really pretty. But to answer the question, for me, yes, absolute classic. I think they were brilliant.
yeah.
Okay.
I think we all agree.
That's agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, Tom, what are we going to talk about next week?
Yes.
What's on the shortlist for
Well,
clangers?
I was thinking we need to go big because we've done some small cars, haven't we?
I feel we need to get out of the small cars.
And also what Craig was saying about we need to appeal to some people in America with cars they could actually buy at the time. So I'm going to vote for my one, which is one of my favourite cars of all time, the Range Rover L322. So that's the one which was launched in 2002, the one that had lots of bits from the BMW X5 in, which I love.
In that case, can I nominate something that was designed by an American in that case? Because our American listeners might like that, mightn't they? I'm going to nominate the BMW 7 Series. I think it was the E65, the really controversial one that was starred by Chris Bangle that introduced iDrive and all that.
And
because again, that was a car that was targeted at the US market, and it was designed over there by an American guy, wasn't it?
it had a 48-volt system, didn't it?
It did, yeah.
Right. Well, we can. Yeah,
raises problems of his own. That does.
Don't spoil it. Keep it for the pod. That's the phrase. Keep it for the pod. If you talk about it now, we've got nothing to talk about next week, have we? So, okay, I've made a note of these.
Okay.
Range Rover and 7 Series.
Yeah.
In common terms. Yep.
And if anybody's got any stories about those that we might want to discuss, then let us know. Where can they find us now, chaps? We have social media places.
They can find on our social media place. You can find us on Instagram at ClangersPod, and Craig's burnt the midnight oil and set up a Facebook page as well for those people who aren't on Insta. So, Craig, how do we find that? Just
go onto Facebook and search for Clangers Podcast, and you'll find us on there.
Please leave comments and bits and pieces, and we'll
pictures of your clangers as well, please.
Exactly, and we're going to be a bit more proactive and try and do clangers that are near us and everything, and try and get some more pictures up. So, if you have been listening, thank you very much. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.
See you next time.